Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another sealed deck building exercise. Today we're taking a look at Arrivals of Ixalan. So our sealed pool will consist of 4 boosters of Arrivals of Ixalan and 2 boosters of a regular Ixalan. So we will be building a 40 card sealed deck out of these 6 boosters, and I'll open them and try to guide you through my thought process while we try and figure out the sealed pool. So let's get started by opening the boring Ixalan boosters first before we get to Arrivals of Ixalan. So let's zoom in a little bit here. Alright, so first back we will be sorting our cards by color to make things easier. So our first card will be a Ryle. Then we have a Bishop's Soldier, a Nest Robber, March of the Drowned, Ravenous Daggertooth, Depths of Desire, Commune with Dinosaurs, Sailor of Means, Skymarch Bloodladder, Demystify. Our first uncommon is a Dusk Legion Dreadnought, Wily Goblin, then an Ixalan's Binding, and our rare is a Kopala Warden of Waves. Alright. On to Ixalan booster number 2. Where we start with a Looming Altasaur, Queen's Bay Soldier, Fire Shrine Keeper, Pterodon Knight, One with the Wind, Crash the Ramparts, and Dive Down, Grazing Whiptail, another Demystify, another Skymarch Bloodladder, Pillar of Origins as our first uncommon, followed by Bishop of the Bloodstained, then a Deadeye Quartermaster, and our rare is an Entrancing Melody. Alright, now we get to our Arrivals of Ixalan boosters. Where we have Swaggering Corsair, Sanguine Glorifier, Sea Legs, Vampire Revenant, Knight of the Stampede, Recover, Tilonal's Crown, Strider Harness, Deadeye Rig Hauler, Gruesome Fate. Our first uncommon is a Legion Lieutenant, then a Foul Orchard, a Sadistic Skymarcher, and our rare is a Planeswalker Angrath the Flame Chained. Awesome. On to Arrivals booster number 2. Where we have a River Darter, Frilled Death Spitter, Suncrested Pterodon, Hardy Veteran, another Vampire Revenant, Secrets of the Golden City, Jungle-born Pioneer, Cleansing Ray, Mutiny. Our first uncommon is a Reckless Rage. Then we have Enter the Unknown, a Ravenous Chupacabra, and our rare is a Paladin of Atonement. Alright, and we even get a foil Arterial Flow. On to our second to last booster here, where we have Oraska Raptor, Raptor Companion, Negate, Moment of Craving, Oraska Frillback, Fathomfleet Border, Evolving Wilds, Bombard, Luminous Bonds, Highland Lake as our first uncommon, Cherished Hatchling, Swift Warden, and our rare is Admiral's Orders. Alright, and we even get a foil Huntweek. Alright, that's nifty. And our last booster, we start things off with a Divine Verdict, another River Darter, Fanatical Firebrand, Dusk Charger, another Huntweek, another Vampire Revenant, Jungle-born Pioneer, Buccaneer's Bravado, Grasping Scoundrel, another Secrets of the Golden City, Relentless Raptor as our first uncommon, Pitiless Plunderer, Charging Tuskodon, and our rare is a Radiant Destiny. Alright, and so I've already separated the creatures from the non-creatures in each color, so we can go through them a little faster. So taking a look at white, we see that we have some decent removal options in the form of Ixalan's Binding and Luminous Bonds, and to a lesser extent Divine Verdict. We have a Radiant Destiny with not a ton of support for it. And then taking a look at our creatures, they're pretty disappointing. We've got a Sanguine Glorifier, not a ton of vampires. Then Paladin of Atonement and Bishop Soldier as our best 2-drops here. And then a few pretty underwhelming creatures. Suncrested Pterodon with not a lot of dinos, same with the Pterodon Knight. A Looming Altisor, which is not where you want to be. And then a Raptor Companion. And then a bunch of unplayable cards that are mostly for the sideboard. So all in all, white looks pretty disappointing, besides the maybe splashable removal spells, Luminous Bonds and Ixalan's Binding. So yeah, I think white is probably not going to end up being one of our main colors, mainly because of the lack of creatures. Moving on to blue, we see that we have some exciting cards here, especially in Sealed. Entrancing Melody is great, and 2 copies of Secrets of the Golden City are a lot better than they would be in draft, since the format's a little bit slower in Sealed typically. Depths of Desire can make a treasure and buy some time, so combines well with the Secrets of the Golden City, making that treasure, upping your permanent count. Admiral's Order is not particularly exciting, same with Negate. We've got One with the Wind if we want to get aggressive and dive down to protect our creatures as well. Sea Lags is fine, but then taking a look at our creatures, they're also pretty underwhelming here. We've got a Deadeye Quartermaster with not a ton of vehicles or equipment to go get. We've got a Rig Hauler, which is fine, but we don't have a ton of creatures to enable raid. We've got a Sailor of Means, which is also fine if we're trying to be the more controlling and card advantage-y deck with all the treasure tokens to try and get to Ascend. We've got Kopala, which is pretty bad, same with the 2 River Darters. So blue has some decent non-creature spells in the 2 secrets and the entrancing melody, but otherwise is also pretty disappointing in the creature department. So hopefully our other colors offer something better here. Taking a look at our black cards, we immediately notice we have a lot more cards in black, so black appears to be a lot deeper, and we have some pretty high quality cards here in the form of Moment of Craving and Ravenous Chupacabra, so those are both great. We've got Recover, Arterial Flow, which can be nice in more grindy matchups. Gruesome Fate is not particularly good, same with the Bishop. Sadistic Sky Marcher can be okay if you have a few vampires to go with it. Dusk Charger also excels in decks that can produce a lot of permanents, like black-white, where you can make a lot of tokens, or perhaps blue-black, where you can make a lot of treasures. Then we have a whole bunch of flyers here, 3 Vampire Revenants, and 2 Skymarch Bloodletters. Bloodletter a lot better than the Revenant, but both playable. The Plunderer is okay, same with the Border, and then we have some cheaper creatures and a March of the Drowned as well, but it's not like we have a ton of pirates to go with it. So all in all, black looks pretty decent here. We've got a decent amount of creatures, some good removal spells, and some card advantage cards as well. So black looks to be our best color so far. So let's move on to red, where we have a Bombard as a great removal spell. The Bravado is great in a pirate deck. Crown's not particularly exciting. We've got a Reckless Rage, which shines in red-green. Mutiny is always playable. And Ryle is not really a card I'm excited to play here. And then taking a look at our creatures are a little bit underwhelming in red as well. We do have a Charging Tuskodon, which is great. The Raptor is more of a filler card. The Death Spitter is okay. And the Corsair as well. Nest Robber is not particularly exciting, same with the Goblin. And the Fire Shrine Keeper and Firebrand are also pretty specific for more aggressive style of decks. So overall, red doesn't look particularly great. We've got some good removal spells in Mutiny and Bombard, and then some okay creatures here in the Tuskodon, the Death Spitter, and the Corsair. But other than that, red is not particularly deep, so it could be a support color to black, for example, but it's probably not good enough to combine with blue or white, since otherwise we don't have enough creatures. So let's move on to our last primary color here in green, where we have 2 copies of Hunt a Week as great removal spells, a Crash the Rampart as a nice combat trick, Commune if we end up with enough dinosaurs, Enter the Unknown is not very good. Then taking a look at our creatures, we have a Grazing Whiptail and a Knight of the Stampede, but we don't have a lot of expensive dinos, so the Knight of the Stampede doesn't look particularly great. We've got 2 Jungleborn Pioneer, which is always okay. Ravenous Daggertooth, which is fine, same with the Frillback. A Swift Warden, which is pretty exciting as a 3-drop. And then our 2-drops are a Cherished Hatchling and a Hardy Veteran. So green looks okay, not exciting, but I guess we do have 2 Hunt a Week. And then our creatures are pretty small, we didn't open any large dinosaurs. So that's typically where you want to be green if you open a few of those big trampling dinos to top off your curve with. But we didn't end up with any of those. But we did open some nice multicolor cards. We've got, of course, our Planeswalker, which is pretty good in red-black. We've got a red-white for a more aggressive deck, and a Legion Lieutenant if we end up in vampires. But it didn't look like we had a ton of vampires to go with the Lieutenant, unfortunately. Then some colorless cards here. We've got a Dreadnought, which is always okay. A Pillar of Origins if we're ramping in a particular tribe, but that doesn't look to be the case here. And a Strider Harness, which is not particularly exciting. And then some mana fixing as well in Foul Orchard, Highland Lake and Evolving Wilds, so we could maybe do some splashing if we don't end up with enough playables in 2 colors, or if we just want to up the power level of our deck. So to get things started, I think I want to try out maybe a black-red build, just to see how the Planeswalker would fit in, and if we end up with enough creatures in red-black. And just to see how the deck would look like, lay out the curve real quick, and that way we can compare different builds. So I'll be back in a bit. So this is how the red-black deck could look like, but these are only 21 cards at the moment, so we would still need to add 2 more cards, and we're already playing a few dubious cards like Nest Robber or Oraska Raptor, which are not particularly exciting. And then taking a look at the rest of the cards we could potentially play, those include Dusk Charger and Plunderer, but as you can see we already have a lot of 4-drops in our deck. Don't really want an Arterial Flow when we have this many 3-drops. And then Gruesome Fate's not great, March of the Drowned's not great since we already have a Recover. Bishop of the Bloodstained looks pretty bad here. And Grasping Scoundrel we're not really interested in, since we don't have a lot of combat tricks to get him through. And then taking a look at our red cards, we have a Buccaneer's Bravado, which I guess we could play since we do have a few pirates, but it's not all that exciting since we don't have a ton of 2-drops to really take advantage of the aggression. We have a Tilonali's Crown, which is not particularly exciting. A Reckless Rage kills most of our creatures in this deck, so it's not great. Ryle doesn't do much for us, same with Wily Goblin or Fire Shrine Keeper. So we're short on a few playables here in the red-black deck. Then taking a look at our curve, we can also spot some problems. We have very few 2-drop creatures, so we can easily fall behind in the early game. And then most of our 3 and 4 drops are actually flyers. And if most of your creatures are flyers, you also want to back them up with some beefy ground blockers, but we don't really have any of them. And that means if we're racing an opponent with our flyers when the opponent's just curving out with power and toughness, then we can also easily fall behind and not win that race. So I don't actually like the look of this red-black deck, even though we do get to play with our sweet Planeswalker. In the end, I don't think it's worth it. Then taking a look at our potential splash options, we do have this Foul Orchard and Highland Lake to potentially let us splash green or blue. So let's consider those options. If we take a look at our green splashable cards, I would say that we mostly are looking at 2 copies of Hunt a Week. But if we lay those on our curve, they also don't look great, given our low toughness creatures to start with and our multitude of 4-drops. So splashing green doesn't look all that appealing, and splashing blue also doesn't look all that great, since most of our good blue cards are double blue in Entrancing Melody and Secrets of the Golden City. So splashing blue also doesn't seem very appealing here. So straight black-red isn't good, and splashing another color also doesn't really work out. So I think we have to scrap red-black and maybe look for a better build somewhere else. But I do think that the black core of creatures and removal spells is pretty decent. So I think we'll continue with our black cards and maybe see how black-green looks like. So we'll be back in a bit. So this is how the black-green deck would look like. Right now we have 22 cards, so we would still need to add at least 1 card if we want to play with 17 lands, which I think in this deck we do. And the last option is probably the 3rd copy of Vampire Revenant, so we could add that to the deck as well here. And as you can see, the deck has a pretty clear game plan, and that is to gum up the ground with some larger green creatures and then try to win the game with the black flyers. We have 2 Bloodletters, a Sky Marcher, and then 3 Revenants. And then we have a bunch of removal in the Chupacabra, Moment of Craving. We have a Trick in Crash the Ramparts and 2 more removal spells in Hunt a Week. And then some card advantage in Arterial Flow and Recover. And we do have a fair amount of vampires to go with the Arterial Flow, and also to enable the Sky Marcher, since all the Revenants are vampires, as well as our black 3-drops and our Queen's Bay Soldier. So overall the deck looks okay. Ideally we would have some more 2-drops, since now we have mostly 3s and 4s, so we wouldn't be really curving out a lot and stuck playing only 1 card every turn, but we simply don't have the 2-drops in these colors. So maybe we can look at black-white after all, since now we do have a decent amount of vampires in black actually, so maybe black-white vampires could work. We also had that rare enchantment that gives our creatures +1/+1 of a certain creature type. So maybe black-white vampires could work after all, since we also do have that Legion Lieutenant, so we can explore black-white, and otherwise we can maybe take a look at black-blue, see how that would look like, and go from there. As far as splashes goes in black-green, I don't think it's necessary. We could technically maybe splash some of the white removal spells like Luminous Bonds or Ixalan's Binding, but I think that would mess up our mana too badly, since we do have some double green and double black cards in the deck already. So I don't think it's worth splashing white here, given that we only have the Evolving Wilds as mana fixing. So yeah, let's take a look at black-white, see how that looks like, and see if it impresses us more than black-green, since right now black-green does look like our frontrunner. So we'll be back in a bit. So this is how black-white would look like. Right now we have 21 cards laid out in front of you, so that means we still have to add a few more cards to fill out the deck, and we have a few options of how to do that. We could add some of these playable black and white cards, even though they're not all that exciting. We have the border, which always makes us lose 2 life since we don't have any other pirates, but it's still a fine curve filler since we are missing a few 3-drop creatures. We could play the Bishop of the Bloodstained since we do have mostly vampires in our deck, so this could drain the opponent for a bunch, but still not that exciting. And the Pterodon would just be a 2/5 flyer, don't have a ton of other dinosaurs besides the companion, so it would just be a 2/5 flyer for 5, which could be serviceable in our flyers deck here. So adding 2 of these 3 cards could work out fine. But what I also kind of like is splashing green for 2 copies of Huntaweek, since we do have Foul Orchard plus Evolving Wilds to fix our mana, so it's not too difficult to add a forest to our deck and then play 2 copies of Huntaweek, which gives our deck a little bit more removal. The only drawback of playing Huntaweek is that we have a lower creature count, and it doesn't work all that well with our 3 copies of Vampire Revenant with only 1 toughness. So overall I'm kind of liking the look of this black-white deck, mostly because we get to play with more 2-drops, which black-green didn't have access to, and we have more synergies with our vampires, mostly thanks to Legion Lieutenant, Radiant Destiny, and we get to pick up some powerful cards like the Bishop Soldier and the Paladin of Atonement. Sanguine Glorifier also works nicely with our other vampires, and Dusk Charger also works quite nicely in a deck with lots of cheap black and white creatures, since we can easily get up to the 10 required permanents to make it a 5/5, at which point Huntaweek becomes a lot more appealing. So I'm definitely liking the look of this black-white deck more than the black-green deck. I'm still not sure if we should be splashing green for Huntaweek or not, but you can let me know in the comments what you would do. Would you be splashing Huntaweek, or would you be playing some of these additional black and white cards? So to wrap things up and just to be thorough, maybe we can take a look at blue-black, since we haven't really looked at the blue cards in depth yet, and perhaps we could even splash red in that build since we do have access to Highland Lake, so we'll be back in a bit. Alright, so this is how the blue-black splash red deck would look like, and as we can see it does look pretty spicy since we get access to a lot of card advantage engines here with both the Arterial Flow to make the opponent discard, as well as Secrets of the Golden City to draw cards. We do have some treasure makers here in the form of Sailor of Means and Depths of Desire to help us fix our mana, but also to get us closer towards 10 permanents for a sense, since we do have the Dusk Charger and 2 copies of Secrets of the Golden City, where we want the City's Blessing. And Sea Legs also counts as a removal spell that stays in play, most likely to up our permanent count, and by playing red we get access to Mutiny, Bombard and Angrath, and of course we can splash red pretty easily thanks to our treasures and thanks to Highland Lake, so we only need to play 1 mountain together with this Evolving Wilds to be able to play all our red cards pretty easily. So I do like the fact that we have access to more card advantage and more removal than perhaps some other color combinations, but the deck still has some issues here in that we're lacking 2-drops and we're kind of lacking creatures in general, so we could get run over before our card advantage really starts setting in. So I would certainly start by playing the black-white splash green deck, and then if you notice that your opponent has a very grindy deck with a lot of removal spells, where the black-white deck might fall short, you could consider sideboarding into the blue-black splash red deck, which has access to more removal spells and card advantage engines to pull ahead in the late game. But you don't want to be vulnerable to an aggressive start, which is why I would not start with the blue-black deck, which can definitely lose to a quick start from the opponent. So I think that's gonna do it for this sealed deck building exercise. I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.